Lesson 9, Using Built-in Functions and Libraries. In this lesson, you'll learn the basics of objects in JavaScript and the details of using the math and date objects. We'll also look at some third-party libraries which allow you to achieve amazing JavaScript effects with a few lines of code. The topics we will cover in Lesson 9 are using the math object, working with math functions, using the with keyword, working with dates, using third-party libraries, and other libraries. The math object is a built-in JavaScript object that includes math constants and functions. You don't need to create a math object. It exists automatically in any JavaScript program. The math object's properties represent mathematical constants, and its methods are mathematical functions. Three of the most useful methods of the math object allow you to round decimal values up and down. Math.ceil rounds a number up to the next integer, Math.floor rounds a number down to the next integer, and Math.round rounds a number to the nearest integer. All of these take the number to be rounded as their single parameter. You may notice one thing missing, the capability to round to a decimal place, such as for dollar amounts. Fortunately, you can easily simulate this. Here is a simple function that rounds numbers to 2 decimal places. This function multiplies the value by 100 to move the decimal and then rounds the number to the nearest integer. Finally, the value is divided by 100 to restore the decimal to its original position. One of the most commonly used methods of the math object is the math.random method, which generates a random number. This method doesn't require any parameters. The number it returns is a random decimal number between 0 and 1. You'll usually want a random number between 1 and a value. You can do this with a general-purpose random number function. This is a function that generates random numbers between 1 and the parameter you send it. This function multiplies a random number by the value specified in the num parameter and then converts it to an integer between 1 and the number by using the math.floor method. The math object includes many functions beyond those you've looked at here. For example, math.sine and math.cos calculate sines and cosines. The math object also includes properties for various mathematical constants such as math.pi. The math.random method generates a random number between 0 and 1. However, it's very difficult for a computer to generate a truly random number. Today's computers do reasonably well at generating random numbers, but just how good is JavaScript's math.random function? One way to test it is to generate many random numbers and calculate the average of all of them. In theory, the average should be somewhere near 0.5, halfway between 0 and 1. The more random values you generate, the closer the average should get to this middle ground. As an example of the use of the math object's methods, you can create a script that tests JavaScript's random number function. To do this, you'll need to generate 5,000 random numbers and calculate their average. No need to get your calculator out. You can use a loop to generate the random numbers. You'll be surprised how fast JavaScript can do this. To begin the script, you will need to initialize a variable called total. This variable will store a running total of all the random values, so it's important that it starts at 0. Next, you will need to begin a loop that will execute 5,000 times. You should use a for loop because you will want it to execute a fixed number of times. Within the loop, you will need to create a random number and add its value to total. Here are the statements that do this and continue with the next iteration of the loop. Depending on the speed of your computer, it might take a few seconds to generate those 5,000 random numbers. Just to be sure something is happening, the script will display a status message after each 1,000 numbers. The final part of your script will calculate the average by dividing total by 5,000. Your script can also round the average to 3 decimal places using the trick you learned earlier in this lesson. To test this script and see just how random those numbers are, you can combine the complete script with an HTML document and script tags. This list shows the complete random number testing script. If you want to test the script, load the HTML document into a browser. After a short delay, you will see a result. If it's close to 0.5, the numbers are reasonably random. The result shown here is 0.502. The with keyword is one you haven't seen before. You can use it to make JavaScript programming easier, or at least easier to type. The with keyword specifies an object, and it is followed by a block of statements enclosed in braces. For each statement in the block, any properties you mention without specifying an object are assumed to be for that object. As an example, suppose you have a string called last name. You can use with to perform string operations on it without specifying the name of the string every time. In this example, the length property and the toUpperCase method refer to the last name string, although it is only specified once with the with keyword. Obviously, the with keyword only saves a bit of typing in situations like this. However, you might find it more useful when you're dealing with a DOM object throughout a large procedure, or when you are using a built-in object such as the math object repeatedly. The date object is a built-in JavaScript object that enables you to conveniently work with dates and times. You can create a date object anytime you need to store a date and use the date object's methods to work with the date. The date object has no properties. To set or obtain values from a date object, you must use the methods described in the next section. You can create a date object using the new keyword. You can also optionally specify the date to store in the object when you create it. You can use any of these formats. You can choose any of these formats depending on which values you wish to set. If you use no parameters, as in the first example, the current date is stored in the object. You can then set the values using the set methods described in the next section. A variety of set methods let you set components of a date object to values. As an example, this statement sets the year of a date object called holiday to 2003. You can use the get methods to get values from a date object. This is the only way to obtain these values because they are not available as properties. Here are the available get methods for dates. Finally, a few functions are available to help your date objects work with local time values and time zones. Along with these basic functions, JavaScript 1.2 and later include UTC versions of several of the functions described previously. These are identical to the regular commands, but work with UTC instead of local time. Two special methods of the date object allow you to convert between date formats. Instead of using these methods with a date object you created, you use them with the built-in object date itself. These include: when you use JavaScript's built-in math and date functions, JavaScript does most of the work. You don't have to figure out how to convert dates between formats or calculate a cosine. Third-party libraries are not included with JavaScript, but they serve a similar purpose, allowing you to do complicated things with only a small amount of code. Using one of these libraries is usually as simple as copying one or more files to your site and including a script tag in your document to load the library. We will discuss several popular JavaScript libraries in the following sections. Prototype, created by Sam Stevenson, is a JavaScript library that simplifies tasks such as working with DOM objects, dealing with data in forms, and remote scripting. By including a single prototype.js file in your document, you have access to many improvements to basic JavaScript. Adding prototype to your pages requires only one file, prototype.js, and one script tag. The code for a task like on-page animation can be complex, but you can also include effects in your pages using a pre-built library. This enables you to use impressive effects with only a few lines of code. Scriptaculous by Thomas Fuchs is one such library. It includes functions to simplify drag-and-drop tasks, such as rearranging lists of items. It also includes a number of combination effects, which lets you use highlighting and animated transitions within your pages. For example, a new section of the page can be briefly highlighted in yellow to get the user's attention, or a portion of the page can fade out or slide off the screen. After you've included the appropriate files, using effects is as easy as using any of JavaScript's built-in methods. For example, these statements use Scriptaculous to fade out an element of the page with the ID value test. Scriptaculous is built on the prototype framework described in the previous section and includes all of the functions of prototype, so you could also simplify this further by using the value function. There are many more JavaScript libraries out there, and more are appearing all of the time as JavaScript is taken more seriously as an application language. Here are some more libraries you may want to explore. Dojo is an open-source toolkit that adds power to JavaScript to simplify building applications and user interfaces. It adds features ranging from extra string and math functions to animation and Ajax. The Yahoo UI library was developed by Yahoo and made available to everyone under an open-source license. It includes features for animation, DOM features, event management, and easy-to-use user interface elements such as calendars and sliders. MochiKit is a lightweight library that adds features for working with the DOM, CSS colors, string formatting, and Ajax. It also supports a nice logging mechanism for debugging your scripts. In this lesson, you learned some specifics about the math and data objects built into JavaScript and learned more than you ever wanted to know about random numbers. You also learned about third-party libraries that can simplify your scripting. You can now test your knowledge in the quiz area, access the scripts we learned in the lab, or go through the lesson again. The choice is yours. Thank you for choosing Sam's Teach Yourself.